Good morning, or good afternoon. Well, welcome member and guests to the 2014 ASMBS Mason Lecturer. I am honored to present our 2014 Mason Lecturer guests. This lecture is actually developed by Dr. Edward Mason in honor of his name and was established in 1989. And has been given by prominent members of the bariatric and surgical community. And this year, I'm very happy to let you know that our Mason lecturer is our own Dr. Edward E. Mason. Let's see if Dr. Mason can come live to us. Dr. Mason, how are you? We are here at Obesity Week 2014. We have approximately 2,000 members in the audience here, and we are delighted to hear your speech today. And I'm going to present to you a little presentation first about yourself to our members and guests here. So for those of you who do not know Dr. Mason, it will be enlightening to learn a little bit more about him and his vast contribution to the field of obesity research and bariatric surgery. And for those who are new to this field and do not know him, I think it will be a great gift. It's important to know the history of our specialty as it will help us to care for our patient. Dr. Mason is often called the father of obesity surgery. In 1966, Dr. Mason performed the first loop gastric bypass. And I quote, this is from Dr. Mason, "I take the undesirable effect of gastric resection, which was weight loss, and use it for a desirable effect to treat obesity." In 1977, Dr. Mason held the first gastric bypass workshop at the University of Iowa. And in that book, there's a chapter on data of diabetes, blood pressure, and laboratory tests after gastric bypass. And this is the actual picture of one of the page. And as you can see there, 30 of the patients have diabetes and answer their question, and 17 of them claim that they no longer have diabetes at all. So we have known this since 1977. In 1983, at one of the bariatric surgery curriculum, Dr. Mason founded the ASBS, stand for the American Society for Bariatric Surgery. Dr. Mason was the first president and served between 1983 to 1985. Dr. Mason also established the first national and then later international bariatric surgery registry. Dr. Mason, we all owe you an enormous gratitude for your vision and founding of our society and your persistent drive for the acceptance of the surgical treatment of obesity. His accomplishment is farther reaching than what I listed here, but I will just name some of them. In 2003, Dr. Mason was the recipient of the University of Iowa Distinguished Alumnus for Achievement Award. In 2005, he was the recipient of the ASMBS Foundation Outstanding Achievement Award. And then in 2013, he received the American Surgical Association Medallion for Advancement of Surgical Care. For those who do not know the American Surgical, it is the oldest and most prestigious surgical organization in the US. And this award was given to recognize an individual who have made seminal contribution to clinical surgery. There have been only two other recipients of this medallion, Dr. Donna Morton for his work in melanoma, and Dr. Tom DeMeester for his work in gastroesophageal reflux disease. This medallion represents the highest award bestowed by the association. Although Dr. Mason cannot join us in person, we are able to have him here through televideo. Member and guests, please join me for a warm welcome for our 2014 Mason Lecturer, Dr. Edward E. Mason. So at this time, we have a pre-recorded lecture by Dr. Mason. I would like to show that to you. And then Dr. Mason, we will be back to you right after this lecture. Can we show the lecture, please?
First, Jordana, my wife for 70 years, suggested a talk title. I gave her another kiss. Keep it simple, surgeon. I was an only child, born in a taxi, going around the corner of 16th and State Street in Boise, Idaho, with mother on the back seat, grandma on the floor, and dad riding shotgun by the teenage driver who was on his first day of work. From ages 1 to 9, we lived near the University of Idaho in Moscow, where Dad introduced a series of courses in journalism. We lived a block downhill from a fraternity house where I was introduced to oyster crackers. Our family took the student train south to Mountain Home one Christmas, and the students carried me through the train on their shoulders. My first words were, "Raw, raw, Idaho." I turned blue at age 2. Dad picked me up by the ankles and shook a toy out of my airway, saving a life of 94 years so far. My mother's parents owned gently waved volcanic lava desert behind the house Grandpa built and where the Mountain Home bomber base was built during World War II. At age 8, alone in that desert, I was hunting rabbits with a single-shot .22 when 3 coyotes popped up from behind one of the volcanic desert waves with tongues hanging out. I thought, those cannot be dogs. They must be coyotes, and they kill lambs. I shot one in the middle, and all 3 disappeared. I reloaded and found the dead coyote, which I slung over my shoulders for the walk back to Grandpa's house. Grandpa was very excited. He was the only one who ever said anything to me about my hunting success. He took the coyote to collect a bounty. At least that is what he said. He probably performed an autopsy. He was the Mountain Home coroner. Suddenly, at age 79, while writing about this, I realized that those coyotes were also hunting and would have had me for dessert in the desert had I delayed shooting more than a few seconds. Grandpa surely knew about the group hunting habits of coyotes. Within a year, Dad moved our family away from the Wild West to Iowa City, where I had paper routes, York barbells, and long bike rides for swims in a new lake 12 miles from home. I walked 8 blocks home for lunch until I graduated from high school. My BMI remains 20 today, and I still swim every weekday noon immediately after eating. My research interest was not obesity, but to design a simple and reversible operation to replace gastric resection. My interest in obesity in 1966 was a last resort for a disease to treat with gastric bypass. I read O.N.H. Wangenstein's papers about stomach surgery research during my first year in medical school at the University of Iowa. At the beginning of my second year, I wrote Wangenstein about his academic training program. Wangenstein invited me to spend a day with him, after which he told me he would have a place for me. I obtained my PhD in surgery at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis in 1953. I then joined the surgery department at the University of Iowa, my hometown. In 1965, I decided to develop gastric bypass as a simpler operation than gastric resection. I planned animal laboratory research during 2 weeks of study and attendance of lectures in the fall of 1965 about stomach physiology at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada. Gregory gave a lecture about his and Tracy's isolation of gastrin. This began my interest in gastrin, which I showed is depressed by gastric bypass. In 1966, after providing that gastric bypass would decrease the secretion of hydrochloric acid and thus not cause ulcers, I began two studies in patients to find a use for gastric bypass. In a study of 8 patients with duodenal ulcer, only one was cured. He was also morbidly obese and lost excess weight. A simultaneous second study of treating morbid obesity with loop gastric bypass was more successful, as you know. Wangenstein's patients with peptic ulcer treated with subtotal gastrectomy and a retrocolic short loop gastroenterostomy lost weight even when they had been normal in weight. Wangenstein told these patients that they would be healthier and live longer at a lower weight. They learned to eat smaller meals more frequently and to avoid foods that caused dumping symptoms. I made a virtue out of dumping, which for lean patients with ulcer had been undesirable, weight losing, and a side effect. The alternative in obesity surgery was diarrhea with intestinal bypass. In 1981, I was invited to help found an obesity society in Japan at a meeting scheduled for 1983. I had read that watching children leave school at the end of the day in Japan showed a threatening problem of obesity. I decided that if Japan needed a society for obesity, the United States should have an American Society for Bariatric Surgery. This would encourage investigations in clinic and laboratory, help interchange ideas and experience, provide guidelines, education, outcome data, and assure quality. I had been considering an American society because we had been providing an obesity surgery postgraduate course for 7 years. The postgraduate course and American Society for Bariatric Surgery provided early obesity surgeons a way to obtain and provide information about these new operations and the patient care that was required. We were 70 surgeons teaching each other. The International Bariatric Surgery Registry in 1985 was voluntary and provided for surgeons who wish to achieve continuous improvement in patient care. William Edwards Deming had early failure in the United States and success in Japan with such efforts in industry, and was a stimulus. Owen and Sarah Wangenstein in 1987 published a 785-page history entitled The Rise of Surgery, with a subtitle, From Empiric Craft to Scientific Discipline. Now, after 36 years, empiricism too often guides the selection of operations for treatment of obesity and type 2 diabetes. Bariatric surgeons need to know much more about the mechanism, the science. Surgeons should know how the digestive tract determines the concentration of what is swallowed before and after an operation, and how this influences plasma glucose. This requires an understanding of tonicity, osmolality, and dumping, both normal dumping and increased dumping after gastric bypass and sleeve gastrectomy. If two operations resolve diabetes by the same mechanism, they should not be combined as a new operation with the expectation of doubling effectiveness. The ultimate goal of surgeons should be to eliminate the need for performing surgical operations. Resection of most of the stomach has returned, and it is gaining popularity, despite the inherent risks of a staple line that extends from the esophagus to the duodenum. The ballooning portion of the stomach can be invaginated rather than resected. This has been shown by Elias Darido with studies in swine and rodents. Fundic invagination now needs approved study in patients. Sleeve gastrotomy, fundic invagination, is reversible like gastric bypass. It will be free of complications of a stapled sleeve. Despite increasing numbers of obesity operations, the epidemics of obesity and type 2 diabetes have contributed to treatment of less than 1% of candidates. Children and adolescents have become surgical candidates. They need a reversible operation that is simple, safe, and effective for a long life. I recommend to you study and provide results from invagination of the fundus sleeve gastrotomy, which returns the benefits of sleeve gastrectomy and the reversibility of gastric bypass. Only a small piece of invaginated fundus is removed when the invaginated fundus is anastomosed to the antrum. The thin-walled, ballooning portion of stomach is turned inside out, which eliminates dilution and duodenal-regulated gastric dumping. This could restore my original 1966 goal of decreasing the use of gastrectomy. Gastrotomy was the first operation performed in those days, and it was for removal of a swallowed knife. Surgeons should make the decision to operate and take care of their patients based on knowledge of mechanisms. Surgeons should help in the study of GLP-1 secretory stimulants that are not absorbed and reach distal bowel. This is the mechanism, the science of patient treatment for type 2 diabetes. Study the literature, be informed, help with a paradigm shift as mechanistic science of the digestive tract replaces empiricism. You are a physician who operates and not a barber surgeon who just operates and lets non-surgeons take care of your patients. Non-surgeons tend to treat all diabetes with insulin, which is toxic when it is too high in concentration. Type 2 diabetes is what you have elected to know about if you want to be a metabolic surgeon. You should not be treated with insulin. Only type 1 diabetes is insulin dependent. Type 2 diabetes is GLP-1 dependent. Some patients with type 2 diabetes develop type 1 diabetes and may need treatment for both types of diabetes. The elimination of a need for treatment of diabetes after gastric bypass was reported at the first Iowa postgraduate course in 1977. We now know that the resulting hyperosmotic flushing exposes distal bowel to glucose and other stimulants of L-cell secretion of GLP-1. GLP-1 is the hormone required to decrease insulin resistance. Type 2 diabetes is GLP-1 dependent diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is also a disease of the digestive tract. Bariatric surgeons should now understand normal dumping and how glucose mimetics or other poorly absorbed L-cell stimulants could reach the L cells in the distal bowel and prevent or resolve type 2 diabetes without surgery. Bariatric surgery has always been a last resort, and this will continue, but may cause surgeons to triage towards resolving the most disease with the resources available and by increasing treatment of adolescents and children, especially if sleeve gastrotomy is as successful as sleeve gastrectomy. My original goal of simplifying and decreasing need for stomach resection will be fulfilled. You will also decrease the greenhouse effect by using cars, houses, etc. with carbon sheeting called Genesis. Carbon dioxide in our air is twice the safe level and increasing. We are losing species. Humans are also species. Thank you for listening, and consider paradigm shifting towards peaceful confluence of views based upon scientific discipline, not empiricism. Keep it simple, surgeon, and reversible if possible, just in case the old stomach is needed and can be used with new knowledge. Thank you for being here, and thanks to those who keep and study records which provide improvement in patient care. Thanks to those patients who provide follow-up data. Thanks to 2013 President Jamie Ponce, 2014 President Din Nguyen, and President-elect John Morton for this opportunity to visit with you. Thanks to editor and surgeon Raul Rosenthal. The paradigm shifts are increasing toward the science of mechanisms and away from empiricism. Health and peace begin with converging views hidden in past experience. Provide health, peace, and long life to our descendants.
That was an exceptional speech, and your wisdom, we will forever be grateful. The podium is yours, Dr. Mason. The crowd here, we have 2,500 to 3,000 people in the audience. Please, you can address the crowd.
Thank you all for being here. I wish you were here in Iowa City, but this is just about as good.
Yes. There won't be any hotel there that will fit us. So I think we better just stay here. So Dr. Mason, for the next half an hour, I would like to recognize you with a tribute for your vision in starting bariatric surgery at a time period when all odds were against you, and your vision to form what is now become the largest bariatric surgical society in the world, the ASMBS. Let me ask 3 of your colleagues to come up on the podium with me. Dr. Con Doherty, Dr. James Maher, and Dr. Patrick O'Leary. First, there's a leadership author. His name is Joe Barker, and what he said that vision without action is just merely a dream. Action without vision is just passing time. But vision with action can change the world. Dr. Mason, your vision and action has certainly changed all of our world, and for that, we, the member of the ASMBS, would like to thank you. So first, let me ask Dr. Con Doherty. Dr. Doherty first met Dr. Mason in 1980 when he went to University of Iowa to observe Dr. Mason perform the open vertical banded gastroplasty. He was part of the first 5 members of the Executive Council of the ASBS at that time, and he was our 4th president of the ASBS. In 1991, Dr. Doherty joined Dr. Mason and Dr. James Maher as faculty at the University of Iowa. Dr. Doherty, the podium's yours. You can certainly present right there.
Hi, Ed. I'm very happy to participate in this tribute to you. I thank you for all your teaching and the good times we shared. I'm forever grateful to you for extending to me the privilege to immerse in the medical world you served in. 1980 to 2001, the years of our collaboration were exciting and productive. Recently, the American College of Surgeons published a compendium entitled 100 Years of Surgical Quality Improvements and Revolutionary Advances. Ed, you are cited there with the following accolade. 1966, University of Iowa surgeon Edward E. Mason put into practice the idea of taking the undesirable weight loss effect of gastric resection and using the procedure to treat obesity. Ed, today we all proclaim your historic and momentous contribution. We praise you for your beneficial influence, guidance, and inspiration over the past 48 years. The record of your lifetime achievements is overwhelming. The depth of our gratitude to you is profound. Today, I would like to express a special thanks for some of your brilliant teachings and accomplishments, namely, rejecting the myth that severe obesity is a capital sin called gluttony, for recognizing that severe obesity is an epidemic disease that is intractable without sustained weight loss, for discovering with Chikashi Ito, through pioneering animal laboratory research, that gastric bypass suppresses gastrin secretion and thereby protects from duodenal and marginal ulcer, for rescuing morbidly obese patients from the consequences of the jejunal ileal bypass and providing them with a safer alternative, for setting the standards that operations for severe obesity must be safe, reversible, predictable, last the lifetime of the patient, and have few side effects, for advocating that dedicated teams of caregivers from supportive disciplines should be provided for the safety and well-being of severely obese patients. For initiating the bariatric surgery colloquium in 1977 at the University of Iowa. This provided a meaningful forum where people who had an interest and/or experience with bariatric surgery could come together and share information. This is the precursor today of the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery, whose membership now exceeds 4,000 members. And lastly, Ed, for insistently supporting standards of measurement and verification of clinical outcomes with longitudinal data. You have transformed for the better the care and treatment of the seriously obese patient. You have lived your vocation as physician, surgeon, teacher, innovator, and leader with the full dedication of your mind and body, heart and soul for the benefit of humankind. We are in awe of your magnificent legacy, and we would like to honor you now with our applause.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. Next, I would like to call upon Dr. James Maher. Dr. Maher moved to University of Iowa in 1985 to work under Dr. Mason, who was at that time was the chair of the Division of General Surgery. He worked with Dr. Mason for almost 20 years. And Dr. Maher, the podium's yours.
Thanks, Dr. Nguyen. Good afternoon, Ed. I understand Dordana's not there, but please give her my best. When I was recruited to Iowa from Mississippi in 1985, as Dr. Nguyen said, my appointment was director of GI surgery, and my interest in bariatric surgery was really secondary to my research and clinical interests in esophageal surgery. However, exposure to Ed Mason had a great influence on me personally, and soon bariatric surgery became an integral part of my activities and remains so. I really want to thank you, Ed, for helping to make care of obese patients such an incredibly rewarding part of my career. Ed's a very quiet and unaffected man. I don't think Ed would yell if someone lit him on fire. I was at Iowa for at least 6 months before, as Dr. Nguyen said, I realized he was chair of general surgery and my direct supervisor. Dr. Mason led by his quiet example. This was a great model for me. I wish I had followed it more often. When I came to Iowa, I was already doing VBGs. I was self-taught, but I thought I should see if the inventor could teach me more. So I scrubbed with you, Ed, on a bunch of cases. And what you taught me was the power of measurement. It became apparent to me from watching you operate that you couldn't judge pouch size just by looking at it. Further, you had developed that ingenious but simple way of measuring pouch size. You couldn't see the posterior wall of the stomach, so a pouch you thought was 10 cc's might actually be 35 to 50 cc's. And I'll bet we reduced the volume in about 40% of our VBGs. This was a great lesson to me, and I'd commend it to all of you. I still believe this is why Ed's results with VBG were much better than anyone else's. Another lesson Ed taught by example was the way he involved private practice bariatric surgeons in the ASBS. Probably the best example in my mind is sitting on my right here, Cornelius Doherty, who came to Iowa as a colleague after many years in San Francisco as a general surgeon. Con became perhaps the world's oldest assistant professor of surgery and a great friend. Con's friendship with Dr. Kuzmak was responsible for our involvement in the early development of the lap band in this country. Ed's early recognition and appreciation of the many pioneering contributions from private practice surgeons was another great lesson for me. I often wondered how Dr. Mason got interested in the problems of heavy people. As he told you today, he obviously has no weight problem by himself, but I received some insight into that early on during my period at Iowa. When we first came to Iowa City, I'm not sure you remember this, Ed, but we invited you and Dordana to a Friday afternoon picnic at City Park with my family. My wife had brought bratwurst to grill, while Dordana brought turkey burgers. Now, turkey burgers are nothing unusual in 2014, but in 1985, in Iowa of all places, this was an insult to the noble pig. We offered Ed a brat, which he promptly accepted. Dordana kept asking Ed, wouldn't he like a nice turkey burger, but Ed stuck with the brats. On another occasion, we had invited our new vascular surgeon and his family to our house for Thanksgiving dinner, and also invited Ed and Dordana so that the new surgeon could meet them. Dordana persuaded us to keep all the food in the kitchen so that anyone who wanted seconds would have to get up from the dining table and go to the kitchen to serve themselves. I've often thought that if we could clone Dordana Mason and put one in every family, there would be no need for bariatric surgery. Finally, a word about the ASBS meetings in Iowa City. For the most part, these were homey, almost county fair-like events on the banks of the Iowa River. I remember one where my wife was enticed by the prospect of winning an ASBS t-shirt to play one of the games, lawn darts. Now, many of you probably don't know this game, but it was an incredibly ill-conceived game where the participants throw what are essentially short javelins with stabilizing wings at a target. What could go wrong with this? Well, if you're dumb enough to walk near the target during a match, impalement might be in your future. However, the last one of these events, before the organization got too big for Iowa City, was an event that I even now don't know how it happened. The university had an incredibly talented French chef who got carried away and conceived a Provinces of France event on the banks of the Iowa River with the food, cheeses, beer, wine of various areas of France featured at food tents on the river. This was a fantastic event. It still ranks among the best parties I've ever attended. And the cost was rumored to be over 20 grand, all of course paid for by equipment vendors. Now, this was an unheard of amount of money in 1993 and was apparently somewhat of a scandal at the university, especially among those in the English and history departments who weren't invited. Ed just kept quiet. As far as I could tell, the furor died down, another good lesson for all of us. I've been gone from Iowa City for over 10 years now. Nevertheless, my memories of my 19 years in Iowa are very sweet ones. Ed taught me a tremendous amount personally, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have associated with a man whose quiet leadership spawned an entire branch of surgery. Ed, many thanks to you and Dordana both.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Maher. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Patrick O'Leary to say a few words. Dr. O'Leary first met Dr. Mason when he traveled to University of Iowa on one of the first early bariatric surgery curriculum. Dr. O'Leary was also our third president of the ASBS. Dr. O'Leary, the podium's yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nguyen. Dr. Mason, Dordana, I am delighted to be here to address this audience and to the two of you from the history, the past, and my relationships and what you have contributed to my career. The opening stanza of Charles Dickens' classic, A Tale of Two Cities, begins with a conflicted statement. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And so it could be said of bariatric surgery at its initiation, as it was spawned in what might be thought of as one of the most unlikely spots in the world, Iowa City, Iowa, in the mid-70s. These were the time of giants in surgery, such luminaries as Jonathan Rhodes, Bob Zollinger, Engelbert Dunphy, Ravitch, Wagenstein, Dragstead, H. William Scott, W. Dean Warren, and even Ed Woodward. The surgical focus was on understanding intestinal physiology, especially as it was related to gastric acid secretion and the production of duodenal ulcers. Anyone who was interested in anything else was not in the central circle of academic surgery. Perhaps the area most removed from the mainstream were surgeons who were interested in metabolic surgery, especially as it was related to obesity. It was common knowledge then that duodenal ulcers were related to gastric acid hypersecretion and that obese people were simply guilty of gluttony and sloth. No self-respecting surgeon would lower themselves to the degree to perform an operation on a basic psychiatric disorder. It truly was a tale of two cities, or if you would, two camps. With Iowa City representing a minority opinion and the rest of the medical community having a contrary view. Dr. Mason, you were of the opinion that obesity was not only a harbinger of other diseases, but a disease unto itself. You eschewed the idea that to produce weight loss, you had to produce a malabsorptive state. You felt that procedures on the stomach could produce weight loss, as well as correcting the underlying altered pathophysiology. It's interesting, isn't it, that we now know that most duodenal ulcers are the result of an infection by a microorganism, and that obesity is currently recognized as a worldwide epidemic, effectively treated by an operative procedure. When I think of you, Dr. Mason, I think of three main characteristics. Firstly, I think of innovation. It resonates well with me. You were constantly thinking at a level that superseded most of us mere mortals. Secondly, you were driven. But as opposed to many others who are driven by innuendo, you chose to be driven by data. Data that you collected, massaged, interpreted, and used to inform the infrastructure of your creative thinking. And thirdly, persistence. If nothing else, persistence. You knew what you believed, and you set about in a persuasive manner to demonstrate to the rest of us the basis upon which you had formed your opinion. As this organization, the ASBS and then subsequently the ASMBS, grew, you served as a stabilizing keel that directed our ship through turbulent times to its current state of sophistication and acceptance. You watched as the entire medical community in the world has come to a better understanding of obesity and has come to understand its position in the hierarchy of serious illnesses that afflict mankind. This is the same proposition that you espoused 4 decades ago. Dr. Mason, we are greatly, no, that's not an adequate word, we are profoundly in your debt. And I thank the organization for the privilege of this tribute.
Dr. O'Leary, thank you very much for that comment. So Dr. Mason, now I would like to conclude this tribute with a video about yourself. This is about the life and the career in medicine of Edward E. Mason. I want to thank Joe Nee from Autumn Production and the entire executive committee of the Executive Council who traveled with me to capture many of these memorable moments. We are planning to have a Mason Presidential Library on our website, and it will be up very soon. So now let us watch this video.
In the year Edward E. Mason. Dr. Edward E. Mason was born on October 16, 1920, in Boise, Idaho. His father was Edward F. Mason, who taught photojournalism at the University of Iowa. His mother was an accomplished sculptor.
My mother made this when I was 12 years old. She could make a bust like this in about 45 minutes.
His family moved to Iowa City when he was 9 years old. He obtained his undergraduate degree and went to medical school at the University of Iowa. He completed his PhD in surgery at the University of Minnesota in 1944. Dr. Mason married Jordana, who received her master's in nutrition from the University of Iowa as well. They had 4 children, 1 daughter and 3 boys. To date, they have 17 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Dr. Mason was instrumental in establishing the American Society of Bariatric Surgery.
We had the American Society for Surgery, so we had an American Society for Bariatric Surgery.
Dr. Mason began an annual postgraduate course for the surgical treatment of obesity called the Bariatric Surgery Colloquium at the University of Iowa, with the first one in 1979.
We were 70 surgeons helping each other.
In 1983, at the Bariatric Surgery Colloquium, the ASBS was officially formed, with approximately 70 members in attendance.
I didn't realize, but towards the end of the meeting, you congratulated us all that we were all founding members of ASBS.
Dr. Mason was the first president of the ASBS and served between 1983 and 1985.
Who decided that?
I did.
Another important contribution from Dr. Mason was his initiative to track the outcome of patients who underwent bariatric surgeries years before anyone else did, and initiated the International Bariatric Surgery Registry in 1996, which has accrued more than 30,000 patients.
You can't analyze data if you don't have it.
And we owe him a lot for that because he gave us a strong foundation to build on.
I'm thankful for Dr. Mason's for his patience, persistence, honesty, and forward thinking.
We owe him a deep debt of gratitude for all that he's provided for all of our patients.
He is maybe one of the greatest visionaries in our field and of all time in the profession of surgery.
Those are enormous things that Ed did, and he's world famous for and will remain deservedly that way.
Becoming a landmark for all of them, and for his entire life, he's still a landmark for every obesity surgeon.
You are a great surgeon, an innovative scientist, an excellent mentor, a great but humble leader, an exemplary family man.
I think that we're so very, very fortunate to have an amazing man like you, Ed Mason, to be the father of our organization. We would not be where we are today if it wasn't for you. And this whole video, all of this is for you. We are where we are today because you helped build a strong foundation for us.
Today, Dr. Mason is 94 and lives with his wife Dordana, who is 92 years old. Dordana reads a book each day and chooses them from the public library. Dr. Mason enjoys taking naps, taking care of their house, and exercise.
I swim every day during the week. It's not open on the weekend. And I've sort of developed a geriatric stroke.
Goodbye, Ed, and please don't forget to embrace Dordana for me. Goodbye.
From each of the members of the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery, we salute you and say thank you.
I'm afraid of being buried in email.
Dr. Mason, just final word. We, the ASMBS, salute you and will forever be grateful for your vision and contribution to our field and organization. Thank you, and you will always be the father of obesity surgery. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful show. I can't imagine who this person really is. I would thank all of you for your efforts. There are lots of people that have contributed. I wish I could thank you all personally. Have a good life and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Please give Dordana our best. Well, that concludes the 2014 Mason Lecturer, and we're going to take a quick change of laptop. So we're going to have some music for you. You can certainly stand up and stretch and dance if you want.